Welcome to the 6th edition of Before the Battle. I am Nick Baldwin, your host for today. As always, I'm joined by the man behind Best Fight Picks and MMA Thought Twitter accounts and bestfightpicks.com. Please welcome Daniel Levi back to Before the Battle. Daniel, thanks for joining me today. How's it going?
It's going amazing. As you can see, beautiful Nashville is right behind me. I'm getting ready for OSP in Teixeira this Saturday.
So just talk us through your trek down. Who are you meeting up with in Nashville for the fights tomorrow?
Oh, first of all, I'm coming here because, this is the only event that's taking place in the South this year. Obviously, they're skipping Atlanta until next year. So, I got to get my fix in. But on top of that, I'm meeting up with the MMA analysis guys and a couple of the other awesome Twitter guys. West True UK fan, Dougie, Super Swarte, all these guys. I'm very pumped. It's going to be a great time.
Nice. And also joining me, as always, today's Knockout lead writer and a writer for Vendetta Fighter. Please welcome Paolo back to Before the Battle. Paolo, how's it going?
How's it going, Nick? How's it going, Daniel? Enjoy Nashville. I'm kind of jealous right now. Want to go to my own live event, but Calgary's not looking good. But, nice to be back on the show. Yeah,
with Calgary, it really isn't too looking good. And it's disappointing for the Canadian fans because it was reported that Calgary was supposed to get Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit, which was, like we said on previous shows, was going to be a great fight when we talked about that. But that was just announced for Melbourne recently, so Calgary has to wait, and it doesn't look like Calgary's going to get a card this year. So too bad, but hopefully next year for sure. So let's get right into things. UFC 190 took place last weekend from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And in the main event, as expected, we had the women's bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey defend her title in 34 seconds. A big knockout win over Bethe Correia. So Daniel, let's get your thoughts on that.
One of my biggest criticisms of, the UFC women's divisions are that the fights don't end via knockout ever. Now, Ronda Rousey, not only did she win via strikes, she face-planted Bethe Correia and knocked her out cold. So, I was very satisfied. I'm a huge Ronda Rousey fan. When you see her slam someone and then break their arm, it's a beautiful sight to see. But now she's knocking people out with one punch, and, she's the greatest female fighter of all time. And I'm going to go on record. A lot of people are going to, criticize me for saying this, but I think she's the greatest female athlete of all time. Sorry, Serena.
It's pretty hard to disagree with that. I gotta agree with you there. And Apollo, just your thoughts on the 34-second fight.
Yeah, and what else is there to say? Ronda Rousey did what she said she was gonna do. She was gonna punish bets, and what more way to punish someone than by knocking them out the same way they said they would. The same way she said she was going to knock out and embarrass Rousey. Rousey turned the tables on her and knocked her out. And it wasn't just a knockout, like Daniel said. She face-planted. You rarely ever see those one-punch knockouts where the girl face-plants. You rarely ever see that in women's MMA. And before, everyone kept saying Rousey was this one-trick pony girl. All she does is armbar. Well, recently she's been knocking out girls. She knocked out Alexis Davis, she knocked out Sarah McMahon, and now she knocked out Bethe Correia. So, she's always adding a new wrinkle to her game. She's always evolving, which is what's so impressive about her.
Now let's go to the opening fight of the main card. It was the other pivotal women's fight on this pay-per-view card, UFC 190. It was a strawweight bout. We had Claudia Gadelha defeating Jessica Aguilar in a very dominant decision, winning, I believe it was 30-27 across the board. All three judges awarded her with a 3-0 decision. Just, Daniel, your thoughts on the fight? And you got to agree with me and with really everyone that what's next for Gadelha? No one else than a champ, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, in a rematch.
Yeah, it proved what we already knew, which was that Claudia Gadelha is the #1 contender in the UFC strawweight division. And, she solidified that by taking out someone who was very well respected outside of the UFC. But as we saw on Saturday, in the UFC is a whole nother ballgame, when you're talking about the big leagues. And Jessica Aguilar, she got a nice warm welcome to the big leagues. And Claudia Gadelha clinched her spot to fight Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the belt.
And Apollo, are you on the same page as Daniel here? There's really no surprises to you about this fight, correct?
Yeah, Gadelha was a big favorite, and we saw why. She was just much better than Aguilar in most aspects of the fight. I thought Aguilar, she hung in there and she made it a somewhat competitive fight. I mean, she didn't get thoroughly dominated, but she clearly didn't win the fight. And I think she even got bloodied up, and that's the worst I've seen Jessica Aguilar in a while. So, you know, the only thing that bothers me is a lot of fans who are not familiar with Aguilar are going to look at that fight and be like, oh, look, she's overrated, she's a scrub, she doesn't belong in the UFC. And that's completely bollocks, because Claudia Gadelha is like pound for pound the number 2 or even arguably the number 1 female in that division. So, you know, losing to Gadelha, that's nothing to be ashamed of.
And you said she might be even the best strawweight fighter inside the UFC, and that's because Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Claudia Gadelha fought back in December of 2014, and Joanna Jędrzejczyk ultimately got that split decision win, went on to beat Carla Esparza to become the champ, but lots of people score that for Gadelha. Who would you pick in the rematch, Paolo?
I'd still go with Jędrzejczyk on this one. I think Jędrzejczyk is evolving as much as Gadelha is, and I think she's going to be able to stuff Gadelha's takedowns a lot more than she did before. And before, when she fought Gadelha, yeah, she got taken down a lot, but Gadelha wasn't really able to do much with him. She still stood up, and when it's going to be a striking battle, I'm going to favor Jędrzejczyk by far. There's really not a lot of females in that division who I would favor in a striking battle against Gadelha. I mean against Jędrzejczyk. I think she would eat up most of them.
And Daniel, are you on the same page as Paolo here? Despite a controversial decision in the first meeting, would you side with Joanna Jędrzejczyk if and when they fight?
No doubt about it, Nick. I think that Joanna Jędrzejczyk's not only going to defeat Claudia Gadelha, I think she's going to go out there and finish her in the later rounds. You know, obviously the first fight to a lot of people was controversial, but if you rewatch that fight, yeah, Claudia Gadelha, she did get 7 takedowns, but she did absolutely nothing with those takedowns, and Joanna Jędrzejczyk dropped her 2 times. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I favor knockdowns over ineffective takedowns all day. So, obviously, I got Joanna Jędrzejczyk here. And still,
I scored that fight back in December in their first meeting for Gadelha. I know it was a very close, so I wasn't too disappointed with that decision. And then you can't be disappointed when Joanna Jędrzejczyk goes and destroys the champ to become the champ and then just destroys the next contender. So I do feel that she's evolved more than Gadelha. I think she's a lot better than she was in that first meeting together. And I'm with Daniel here. I like Joanna Jędrzejczyk inside the distance this time around. I don't think she'll make it close. I think it'll be a one-side beating similar to the fight with Esparza and Penne. So let's go on to the second pay-per-view bout. We have Bigfoot Silva getting the upset against Solo Pelele. And this fight really surprised me because Pelele, in my eyes, aside from Ronda Rousey, was the biggest lock on this card. I just really didn't think Bigfoot Silva had it in him to even beat a mediocre heavyweight that's not even really in the top 20, I don't think. But he proved me wrong. Obviously, Pelele was very close to finishing him in the first round right at the end, but Bigfoot got saved by the bell completely and then got the stoppage win in the second round. So what surprised you with this fight, and what's next for Bigfoot Silva in your eyes, Paolo?
When I was actually tweeting about this, that I didn't trust Pelele enough to lay a lot of money on him, and I'm so glad I didn't put money on him because, man, that was disappointing. I did not see that at all. He almost finished Bigfoot, actually. Bigfoot was saved by the bell there. I think a few more Donkey Kong punches and Bigfoot would have gone out like Pat Barry did. But it is what it is, man. Pelele gassed and Bigfoot took advantage. He put him in a corner and beat him up. As what's next for Bigfoot, I'm not entirely sure right now. I didn't even expect him to win this fight, so I thought he'd be gone, or I think he'd be going to Bellator or anything. Mitrione was recently calling him out on Twitter, and I think they should. That's a good fight. I'm not sure why Bigfoot doesn't want that fight. In my opinion, they should make that fight.
Well, I do know why Bigfoot wouldn't want that fight because I would be confident in Matt Mitrione. But then let me go back to that Ben Rothwell fight, and who the hell knows, really. But Daniel, what were your thoughts on that fight? What surprised you, and what's your take for what's next for Bigfoot Silva?
Nick, you asked me what surprised me about that fight, and I'll tell you right now what surprised me. What surprised me was that Solo Pelele quit in the second round and just completely stopped fighting. So he goes in there in the first round, he does what he wanted to do, which is get him down to the ground, get on top of him, and start landing that ground and pound. So, you'd be like, yeah, it's going in my favor. He walks back to his corner, then the second round starts, and he doesn't take the center of the octagon. This guy backs himself up against the fence and just lets Bigfoot tee off on him for the finish. So, it's really ironic because if you follow Soa Palele on Twitter, he's got all these quotes about never giving up and this and that and never quit. I mean, the guy's so full of shit, I can't even believe it. So, as far as what's next for Bigfoot, I got to go with my man Paolo here. I think that Bigfoot versus Matt Mitrione, it's quite intriguing. If Brendan Schaub isn't moving down to 205, maybe throw Brendan Schaub in there with Bigfoot. But I think it's going to be Bigfoot versus Mitrione next.
With Bigfoot, I actually think he should retire. And the thing, I think more people would be saying this if he got knocked out by Soa Palele, but people forget if there was 5 or 10 more seconds in that first round, Soa Palele would have been the guy that got the W last Saturday night. And I don't want Bigfoot to fight because he will get knocked out by a top 10 guy. Guys that are skilled enough that won't gas as fast as Soa Palele did, and ultimately almost give up, because that's really what it seemed like Soa Palele did. I know it was a cardio mostly, but it really looked like that. And with Bigfoot Silva's his health problem, I don't want to see him fight. Despite him winning, beating Soa Palele, I don't think it's smart for him to fight, and I don't want to see it. So I'm hoping he retires, but I don't think it'll happen. So let's talk about Big Nog versus Stefan Struve. The skyscraper got it done, winning by decision. Now, Daniel, how surprised were you, first off, that it went to a decision?
I'll tell you what surprised me the most. Not the fact that it went to a decision, but the fact that Stefan Struve finally used his reach. He finally used his range so effectively. We always talk about the fact that he is that 7-foot-tall guy. He does John Jones reach, but why doesn't he use that straight right? He used that push kick. I was actually quite impressed with Stefan Struve's performance because, obviously, he said he was sick before the fight. I could tell, but the fact that he's making progress in his stand-up, that's something I've wanted to see from the day he stepped inside the octagon. So, even though it was kind of, I don't know if you want to say lackluster, because to me, anytime you got a legend like Minotauro going in the octagon and then you got Stefan Struve, the skyscraper, it was a technical battle. I enjoyed it, even though the fans didn't really understand what was going on because they were clinching a lot. But if you've ever clinched before, you know that it's not easy to get those double unders and do what they were trying to do. But I really appreciate Struve's use of his range here.
And Apollo, just your thoughts on the fight between Stefan Struve and Big Nogueira.
Yeah, I'd echo Daniel's sentiments there. Stefan Struve was actually using his reach for a while. Because it's funny, every time you hear him in interviews, he always says, oh yeah, I'm going to use my reach, but he never does it. And this time he finally did it. So I'm like, whoa, I guess all the time off got him finally thinking properly. As for Big Nog, yeah, you know what? Big Nog looks slower than ever. I know he wasn't ever really a fast fighter to begin with, but honestly, just watching him, he was just like so slow. And he was tagging Struve a couple of times, actually, and he was hurting him, but he just couldn't put him away, I guess. So I was really cheering for Big Nog to win that fight, but, it is what it is. Good job to Struve for winning.
For sure. And the thing with Big Nog is he's taken so much punishment. I don't think he looked horrendous in that fight. Like, I thought it was a lot closer than 30-27. I scored at 29-28 for Struve, but all 3 rounds were relatively close. And in Brazil, I wouldn't have been shocked, honestly, if they gave that fight to Big Nog. It would have been a bad decision, but I really couldn't call it a robbery. And in Brazil, you got to kind of expect that they sometimes favor the Brazilians. Of course, we've seen that multiple times. Now, with Big Nog, you got to say he's going to retire. I know Dana White kind of already called for his retirement, said they're going to give him a position with the UFC, like an executive position. And I think that's the right move. Would you agree, Paolo?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Big Nog's a legend, man. I mean, you got to keep guys like him around. He's got so much wisdom and so much knowledge to share and to contribute. And he's an icon in Brazil, so he'd definitely be good down there. Maybe he can be a scout or one of the administrative guys down in Brazil and stuff, and shore up the talent. So who knows what he might actually be doing. But, it's definitely good for guys like Big Nog.
And let's skip over the 2 tough finales because we know from last week no one really wants to talk about those. So let's get to the co-main event, the last fight we're going to talk about from UFC 190. Shogun Rua versus Little Nog this time. And number 2, they fought back in Pride when I was a little baby in diapers, and I saw the fight this time. I wasn't watching from my crib like last time. So Shogun Rua won it I guess, controversial decision. I scored it fairly clearly for Shogun 29-28, but I did see some scores in favor of Nogueira. And so how do you score it, Daniel? Just thoughts on the fight?
You know, Nick, I scored it 29-28 for Shogun, but here's the thing. I actually thought Nogueira looked better than Shogun, and it's interesting because, you know, as far as scoring the fight is concerned, you know, the first round, obviously you got to give it to Nogueira. He had Shogun on wobbly legs. He almost had him out, but, you know, Shogun showed that grit, that heart. He got those takedowns. He landed those big body kicks, and he edged out the last 2 rounds. But as far as, you know, what's next for them, Nogueira actually looked like he improved. You know, his speed was looking better. He was looking less, you know, he was looking less tight. He was more loose, and it was a good fight. I was very excited by it. So yeah, who knows what's next for those two? They're absolute legends. They're going to go down in the Hall of Fame, and I'm going to watch their next fights regardless.
Yeah, I will too. Unlike Big Nog and Bigfoot, I'm not completely calling for Shogun and Little Nog's retirement. Obviously, I would not be disappointed because they have taken lots of punishment throughout their careers. They are getting up there in age. Shogun is younger than you'd expect, but I wouldn't be surprised. Well, I would be surprised if they do retire, but I'm not calling for it. But I wouldn't be sad to see their retirement. I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say. But Paolo, just your thoughts on the fight between Shogun and Little Nog too.
I think it was a really technical fight, and actually I was cheering for Shogun from a fan's perspective, but because I bet the under 1.5 on that fight when Little Nog had Shogun on wobbly legs, I was like, come on, finish the fight. But I'm like, yeah, whatever. That was a really good fight, and what really gets me is the fact that the Brazilians at one point were booing them, because I'm like, why are you guys booing these guys? They're like friggin' icons. They're Brazilian icons. What are you guys doing? And so I just had to write about that because I think that was just very disrespectful. I mean, these guys have been through so much, and that wasn't even a bad fight. That was a really good fight.
Yeah, I agree. One fight a night even, and so I do think Reginaldo Vieira deserved that fight of the night, but I wasn't disappointed that Shogun and Little Nog got it because both fights were relatively good and everything. So let's go on to WSOF. We had Rizmar Paul Harris defending his welterweight title against Jake Shields, and a bit of controversy happened. Obviously, we had Rizmar Paul Harris, as he is known to do so. He held on to his Kimura for a bit too long, and they ended up stripping him of the title and indefinitely suspending him. Jake Shields sucker punched him, and so he was suspended indefinitely as well. Daniel, just your thoughts on what happened and eye gouging. Should mention that Paul Harris kept on gouging him in the eyes. So, Daniel, just your thoughts on what happened, and do you think it was the right call by the WSOF to suspend both of them?
Well, here's what I think. You know, prior to the fight, I said that Rizmar Paul Harris was going to tap out Jake Shields, and then he went on to become the first man to tap out Jake Shields. Now, I thought it was going to be via leg lock, which is what, you know, Toquinho usually wins by, but he goes out there and Kimuras Jake Shields and becomes the first man in MMA history to tap out Jake Shields. He's one of the best grapplers around. Now, as far as all the controversy is concerned, I mean, you know, all the white knights are coming out for this fight, you know, crying. So, listen, have you ever seen Toquinho fight before? That's what he does. He's that scary guy that cheats and breaks your leg off and holds the submission too long. I mean, we saw that in the Thomas Dural fight. We saw it, you know, against, who else has he fought? Lucio Linhares, David Branch. I mean, how many guys' legs has he cranked off? And now people are like, oh, my God, he's so bad for the sport. Yeah, listen, it's disrespectful. It's bad sportsmanship. You know, suspend him, fine him. Okay, cool. I'm still going to watch him fight. I don't care what anyone says. When Toquinho is fighting, I'm watching because, look, he is one of the dirtiest guys around. He is, you know, I guess a cheater or whatever. And, you know, that's unsportsmanlike. If I was in there competing with him, I'd be really pissed off. But I'm not in there competing with him. I'm sitting behind a TV screen for entertainment. And anytime he fights, it's entertaining. There's always controversy. So, I mean, look, man, he deserves the suspension. He probably deserves a lifetime ban if we're going to be honest here. But it's not my job to, you know, to give that out. I'm not a judge. I'm just someone who enjoys the sport. And I will definitely continue to watch Rizmar Toquinho's fights.
And Paulo, are you on the same page as Daniel here? Are you in favor of what the WSOF did, strip him of the title, suspend him indefinitely, or do you have anything else to say to add onto what Daniel said?
Not really much to add. I'm in the same page. I mean, everyone knows that Polaris has been a dirty fighter. I mean, he's always the guy that always holds on to his submissions and hasn't done anything to make people think otherwise. So, but no, I might agree with Daniel. I mean, the guy's an exciting fighter. I won't lie. I enjoy his fights. I mean, is Kanye West a dick? Yeah, Kanye West is a dick, but he still makes good music. I mean, is Rosemar Polaris kind of messed up in the head? Yeah, he's pretty messed up in the head, but does he put on good performances? Yeah, he puts on good performances. But as far as what the WSOF did, I don't entirely blame them. I mean, there was so much public outcry. They sort of just got pressured into it, sort of like what happened with the John Jones thing. There was such a big public outcry that they had to do what they had to do.
Yeah, for sure. And like there seemed to be a lot of people that were surprised what Paul Harris did about the eye gouging, and then obviously holding on to the submission. Why would you be surprised when it's Rosemar Paul Harris, who is known to hold on to submissions? I was talking to a guy on Twitter not too long ago. I forget who it was, and he was saying how you should be really surprised. It's a really big deal. And yes, I agree that it's a big deal, but I'm not surprised. You got to expect it now. He's done it so many times when it's something you expect when you see Rosemar Paul Harris fight. Like Daniel said, he is a great fighter, and I will watch him fight, but he is a dirty fighter. He's not great for the sport, obviously. Not a good. He doesn't have good sportsmanship, and should be either fined or suspended or whatnot. But you can't be surprised at all. And now Joe Lozon posted a video, and it was very, very interesting. He basically broke down how long it takes him on average to break a submission when he's the one in the like holding the guillotine or holding whatever. And then he did the same with Paul Harris, and the results were really, really interesting. Now, Daniel, you get a chance to watch Joe Lozon's video.
Absolutely, and Joe Lozon put it perfectly. Joe Lozon is a sportsman-like guy. That's what he is. If you sign the dotted line to fight Joe Lozon, you know that if he taps you out, he's going to let go after you tap. It is what it is. He's a nice guy. But if you sign the dotted line to fight Rosemar Toquinho, I mean, you better know that if you get caught in something, he is going to crank it. It doesn't matter if the ref comes in and tries to save you. Listen, that's what happens when you fight Rosemar Toquinho. Yes, it's against the rules. And yes, Steve Mazzagatti is an idiot for not disqualifying Rosemar Toquinho, but he didn't get disqualified. And Jake Shields knew firsthand going into this fight who he was up against, because he's saying stuff like, if I get one of Toquinho's limbs, I'm going to break it. Well, what's the word I'm looking for, gentlemen? Is it irony? Because that was quite ironic that Jake Shields was the one that got his limb broken. So, yeah, if you sign the dotted line to fight Toquinho, you better expect something to get broken.
And the one thing I want to add is, like, obviously I am in favor of a Paul Harris being stripped of his title, being suspended, and he probably should have even been cut from the WSOF. But the thing is, unless the WSOF has told him before, and this is where it really depends, if WSOF, if the president, Ray Sefo, and the other people involved at the top of the promotion have talked to Paul Harris before, saying, look, you're a great fighter, but what you're doing is not right. You don't have good sportsmanship. You're holding on to submissions too long. You're a dirty fighter. Just straight up tell him you're holding on to submissions long. If they have, then I definitely agree with what they did. But if they haven't, we all see on TV he's done it so many times. But if the WSOF never acknowledged it until now, I kind of have a hard time saying he should be punished as much as he did. Now, Paolo, anything else to add on to that?
Yeah, Daniel pretty much read my mind about how many eye pokes. I mean, that actually reminds me of the Rumble fight, where how many times did Kevin Burns poke Rumble in the eye and Mazzagatti didn't do anything? So yeah, when you're a fighter and you get Rosemar Harris and you get Steve Mazzagatti as a ref, Jake Shields definitely did some bad things. Or maybe it was the trash talk that he was going to say he was going to intentionally hurt Polaris. Maybe he earned that himself, and that's why he got Mazzagatti and his arm almost ripped off. So that's all I got to add to that.
All right, so let's move on to this weekend's UFC card, UFC Nashville, and Daniel is lucky enough to be there. Jealous, but I'm going to Saskatoon event, so won't be jealous for too long. But let's start off the opening fight, the main card. Actually, let's go to the preliminary card. Actually, the headliner of the preliminary, we have Uriah Hall versus Oluwayo Bambo. I have no idea if I said that right or wrong, but that's what I'm going with. So, Daniel, who'd you like here, Hall or Bambos?
Oluwale Bambos. He's one of these guys that, he's never been past the 4-minute mark in a fight, so we don't really know what to expect from him if it goes the distance. Now, Uriah Hall, he consistently goes to split decisions, and Uriah Hall is one of these guys that he's so talented. He can knock out anyone he fights. It's just, is he going to show up? And I'm not sure if it's a mental issue. I'm not sure if it's, a skills issue, because from what I've seen, he's extremely athletic. He's got a great striking arsenal. I mean, he's slammed Rafael Natal, so it's like he gets to these great starts, and then he kind of, I don't know if he coasts or mentally checks out. I don't want to, create scenarios that don't exist, because I'm not inside of this guy's brain, so I don't really know what's going on in there. But what I do know is that when he decides to let his hands go, he can knock out anyone on the planet. So I think that Uriah Hall is going to have an edge here just based on experience.
And Paolo, who'd you like here, Hall or Bambos?
I'm going to go with Hall, too. I mean, I won't be entirely shocked if Bambos goes in there and, shocks the world and knocks out Uriah Hall, although Uriah Hall losing isn't really much of a shock anymore. The thing about Uriah Hall, I don't want to make assumptions here, but I think he's just too nice of a fighter. I mean, I feel like he doesn't really want to hurt his opponent, which is weird, because if you're in MMA, that's what you do. But that's the impression I'm getting, because he seems like one of the most nicest, soft-spoken guys ever. But I'm not Uriah Hall, so I'm not gonna make that assumption.
I kind of agree with you. He seems like that in the cage, but doesn't he go on Twitter all the time and talking trash about people? Was it him that was talking about Michael Bisping, or was that someone else?
Yeah, what happened, Nick, was that I think Bisping and Hall used to spar together, and then during one of Uriah Hall's fights, I think Bisping made a little comment about, what's going on here? Why isn't he fighting? And then Uriah Hall was like, well, I kicked your ass in sparring. So I think it was just a little, verbal back and forth there.
So he's not the nicest person outside the cage, but he is inside. Doesn't make sense, but yeah, I don't know.
But it's Bisping, though. Yeah. Bisping can bring out the heel in everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I guess you can say that. But Uriah Hall, the thing with Uriah Hall is you can never trust him. And he was back in 187. That was when I really saw that. Do not trust Uriah Hall. Rafael Natal, who I don't think is a top 10 middleweight, went out there and won a decision over Uriah Hall. And I actually scored that for Natal. I know some people scored it for Hall, but I think it was fairly clear for Natal there. And you just cannot trust Uriah Hall. And it really depends how Bambos looks. Obviously, you have octagon jitters. That could be a factor. The fact that he hasn't really fought anyone notable. He doesn't have the best wins. I don't think he's been out of the first round either in his 5 professional fights. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to disagree with you because that's what I like to do. I'm going with Bambos here to knock Uriah Hall out just because Bambos, from what I've seen of his previous fights, he looks to be a fairly good fighter. Again, that's against not very mediocre competition, but you can't trust Hall, and I'm going with Bambos. So let's go on to the opening fight of the main card. We have Ray Borg, who I am very high on. I really think he could be a future contender, even a champion once Demetrius Johnson's reign is up when he retires, because no one's beating Demetrius Johnson. But we have Ray Borg taking on Jean Herrera, who's making his debut inside the promotion. Now, Daniel, who do you like here, Borg or Herrera?
I like Ray Borg. Ray Borg is one of these guys that, he's only 22 or 23 years old, and the sky's the limit for Ray Borg. The way he takes people's backs is just unbelievable. It's like a 125-pound Damian Maia minus all the, world championship jiu-jitsu credentials. He's just insane with his jiu-jitsu for MMA, and let me tell you how good this guy is. So, you guys know Patrick Houlihan. He's really good at taking people's back and choking them out, right? And he's got Chris Kaleda's back. He can't choke him out. He's got Shane Howell's back. He can't choke him out either. Ray Borg choked out Chris Kaleda's and Shane Howell. That's how damn good this guy's ground game is. And I think what's going to happen here is obvioususly Eugene Herrera. He's 8-0. He's undefeated, and he has a similar kind of game as Ray Borg. You know, he likes to scramble on the ground. The only problem for him is that Ray Borg's better in every single area of the game. So I think the first round is going to kind of be a little bit of a fight of the night kind of situation where they do a lot of scrambling, a lot of big exchanges on the feet. But then as the fight continues, Ray Borg is his cardio is gonna be right here, and you know, Jean Herrera's cardio is gonna start to go down here, and then Ray Borg is gonna tap him out in the second or third round.
And Apollo, I know Ray Borg is I believe, the biggest favorite. No, he's the second biggest favorite. Scott Holdson is the biggest. He's the second biggest favorite, I think, for a reason. Are you on the page with Daniel? Do you like Ray Borg here, and possibly even inside the distance?
Yeah. Come on, Ray Borg. I mean, I don't know much about John Herrera, but from what I hear, people keep saying he's supposedly this great BJJ fighter. So I did a little bit of tape study on him, and honestly, like, I mean, he did look good, but I mean, the guys he fought were like, come on, they're regional guys, and you really can't. And everyone can look like a big stud in the regional circuit, and they get to the UFC and they get exposed. And I think that's what's going to happen right now. I think John Herrera is going to be competitive for a few while, and then Borg's just going to take over and choke him out.
Yeah, I'm definitely with Ray Borg here. Like I said right at the beginning, I'm very high on Ray Borg. I think he's a future UFC champion. I think he's right now definitely a top 10 guy, top 5 guy possibly. And of course I like him against Jean Herrera. Obviously people have been saying Jean Herrera is a really good fighter and whatnot, but you just can't base that off of his wins in the regional circuit and whatnot. And Ray Borg has beaten UFC caliber opponents and done so with ease. And I like him in this fight. I like him by submission, and definitely the inside the distance prop, if you're better, is definitely something to look at. I don't see this going to the distance at all, and if it does, Ray Borg is going to win a dominant decision. So Ray Borg all the way. He's the second biggest favorite on this card for a reason. He's going to win this fight and go on to be even top 10 guy. Chris Camozzi versus Tom Watson, a middleweight bout. And Daniel, I know you're not the biggest fan of this fight, not at all, but who do you like here, Camozzi or Watson?
You know, it's a tough fight to call because I would Watson to fight. It's just one of those things where we don't know if, you know, he's still up to par. You know, his last fight against Rafael Natal, he got absolutely owned. Rafael Natal doesn't own anybody. So, but then again, a couple fights back, Tom Watson, he gave it to Sam Alvey really good. So, I mean, it's one of those just UFC fights are concerned. So, I mean, Camozzi pretty much drops every single fight. But I do think he's, you know, I know he's younger, he's more athletic. So that, you know, he's got that in his favor. But Tom Watson might be a little grittier. So who knows? I'm going to have to check out the weigh-ins tomorrow and let you know how they look.
And Apollo, who do you like here, Camozzi or Tom Watson?
I really don't know. This is a coin flip fight for me. This could be one of those really gritty, dirty fights. There might be a couple of clinching, wall installing. Might be like just some random striking against each other. I'm just gonna go with Camozzi, like for the same things Daniel said. He's younger. He's got a slight wrestling edge, and he has the better chin. I mean, Tom Watson, I don't think he's ever been finished in the UFC, but he's been wobbled and rocked a couple of times, and I think Camozzi's gonna take it to him. But I'm entirely not confident in that pick, and this is definitely a fight that's a total coin flip fight for me.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. This is a very close fight. Nothing I would bet on if I bet on fights and whatnot. Camozzi, like both of you said, is the fresher fighter, so that's really the only reason I'm siding with Chris Camozzi here to win a decision, probably 29-28, because of course Tom Watson definitely could beat Camozzi, but I just will side with Camozzi because he is the younger and fresher fighter, and I think he gets it done by decision. Then we have Jared Rosholt versus Timothy Johnson, and again, Daniel, not the best fight in your eyes, but who do you see winning, Rosholt or Johnson?
Well, I wouldn't go that far because on paper, you never know how it's going to translate to real life. So I'm hoping that they go out there, stand and bang, and put the crowd on its feet. You know, I hope it's a great fight. Now, on paper, Jared Rosholt's been extremely boring. However, he's been very effective with his wrestling. Now, the thing with Timothy Johnson is that, You know, in his UFC debut, he goes in there against one of those Dagestanis, and if you know about those, those Russian guys, man, they're super good with their grappling and their striking. And Timothy Johnson goes in there and full mounts the Dagestani heavyweight, knocks him out in the first round. Now, he's fighting Jared Rosholt, who I mentioned is a great wrestler. So the thing is he going to be able to stuff the takedowns of the wrestler? I don't know, because I've never seen him go up against a wrestler. So I really have zero clue what's going to happen. You know, you could sit here and be like, no, he's not going to stuff the takedowns. He's going to get grinded out. But, I mean, what if he goes in there and stuffs the takedowns? I really don't know, because I've never seen it firsthand. It's just like people talking about, Conor McGregor. I'm not comparing Timothy to Conor at all, but what I'm saying is people are like, oh, as soon as Conor fights a wrestler, he's going to lose. That's not what happened. Well, I don't know if Timothy's going to lose to a wrestler. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I have no clue what to expect. So I'm going to sit back and enjoy it.
And Apollo, who do you like here, Rosholt or the man with the mustache, Timothy Johnson?
No, I'm going to go with Porn Stash, Timothy Johnson on this. I'm going to go with the underdog pick. And my pick has no logical basis on it. I'm just going to, looking at the heavyweight fights this year, underdogs have won more than favorites. And the thing about Jared Rosholt is he's a grinder, but he gets cocky when he's on his feet. He gets a little bit reckless. That's why he got knocked out by, Olnick. And Olnick is not exactly known as a guy who knocks people out. I mean, he threw like a wild punch at Rosholt, caught him and knocked him out clean. And you know what? I could see Rosholt getting the best out of Timothy Johnson for a good portion of the fight, and then Timothy Johnson, out of desperation, just throws a punch, catches Rosholt, and it's 90-night for Rosholt.
Yeah, with this fight on paper, I really don't think it will be a close fight when it plays to the fight. I think Jared Rosholt will just, like you guys said, grind out either decision or a late TKO ground and pound. But obviously you can't trust Jared Rosholt. Like Paolo mentioned, you can't trust his chin. Obviously these guys are heavyweights, so anyone can get knocked out. But some heavyweights have worse chins than others. And with Alexei Oleinik knocking Rosholt out, you can't completely trust it. Like Paolo said, it was really just a wild punch. It wasn't like a big punch that was wound up and whatnot. I'm going to choose Rosholt by decision, but I wouldn't be shocked if the man with the mustache knocks him out and he gets his second UFC win. So I'm going to side with Rosholt, but it wouldn't shock me at all if Timothy Johnson knocks him out. All right, we have Derek Brunson versus Sam Alvey, and in my opinion, this is one of the most intriguing bouts on the entire card. For reasons I'll get to in a second. But Daniel, who do you like here, Brunson or Marlon Sam Alvey?
This is such a good fight because with Sam Alvey, he'll walk around the ring with a big smile on his face, and he won't throw a single strike. He'll eat every single thing you throw at him, and then he'll be like, all right, I'm going to throw my left hand now. And when he throws his left hand, he launches people in the air. So, it's very bizarre with this guy. And he's also got some veteran tricks up his sleeve, Obviously, he's been training with Dan Henderson for a long, long time. And in that fight with Dylan Andrews, Dylan tries to take him down, and Sam hooks the leg, reverses the position, and knocks him out cold. So the guy's got, some moves up his back pocket. Now, the thing is, with Derek Brunson, this guy's getting better every single time he fights. Not only is he a great athlete, not only is he a great wrestler, but he's turning into a great striker. He's knocking out guys that don't get knocked out. No one's ever knocked out Ed Herman before. And Ed Herman's a guy that's been in there with Glover Teixeira, a guy that's been in there with Jacare. He's never been knocked out in his career. And Derek Brunson went in there and knocked him out in under a minute. So you know that Derek Brunson's making big improvements every single fight, training with Greg Jackson, with Brandon Gibson, with Mike Winklejohn. So I'm going to have to favor Derek Brunson, to just be a little bit more well-rounded in this fight and get the victory that way. But if Sam Alvey lands that big left hand and sends him flying, I'm not going to be surprised at all.
I won't be as all, but Paulo, who do you like here? Smiling Sam Alvey or Derek Brunson?
No, Nick, conventional wisdom in the head dictates that Derek Brunson is going to win here, probably 30-27 or maybe a late finish or something like that. But I'm going to go with the smiling one, man. Smiling Sam Alvey. I can't help it, man. I really like Sam Alvey here. I could entirely see Derek Brunson piece him up on the feet, maybe mix up his takedowns and just dominate him for most of the round. And then he gets a little bit, I don't know, maybe he gets a little bit cocky or he gets a little bit too confident in the stand-up, and Sam Alvey catches him in the left. I mean, with someone like Sam Alvey, all he needs is that one punch. And we know that Derek Brunson isn't bulletproof. Like Jacare knocked him out. So if Sam Alvey catches him, it's lights out. So I'm gonna go with my heart here, and this is gonna be a crazy pick, but Sam Alvey by knockout.
This is the most intriguing bout, I'll say right now, on the entire card, because I really would not be shocked whatsoever if either man wins. With Derek Brunson, my head is saying Derek Brunson by decision because he has more ways to win. Like Daniel said, he'd most likely grind out a decision or a late ground pound TKO. My pick is Derek Brunson by decision, but my heart is saying Sam Alvey gets his 4th straight knockout in the first round. Because like Paolo said, it's not like Derek Brunson has the best chin in the world. I think it's relatively good. It's not like glass or whatnot, but people have knocked him out, and Sam Alvey can knock out anybody. And as beefy as he looks, the smiling Sam Alvey will knock out anybody if he lands a punch, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if he lands a punch. So I was just looking at the card here, and actually Sarah McMahon versus Amanda Nunes has been moved to the main card. Chris Camozzi, Tom Watson is now on the preliminary card. So let's talk about McMahon Nunes here. So Sarah McMahon is coming off a couple decision losses to Amisha Tate, and before that, I don't remember who it was. I know she beat Lauren Murphy back in August, so a year ago. And Amanda Nunes is coming off a big TKO win over Shayna Baszler. Before that, she was stopped by Kat Zingano, the #2 women's bantamweight contender. Paulo, who do you like here, McMahon or Nunes?
No, what I'm gonna go with Amanda Nunes here. I know I'm a little bit tentative with that pick because Amanda Nunes' takedown defense and cardio are not the best, and I think Sarah McMahon definitely has an advantage in that sense. I can see Sarah McMahon grinding her out, wearing her out, and probably getting a late stoppage. But I favor Nunes to stuff enough of her takedowns to beat her up on her feet. The thing is, I tweeted a while ago that I thought Sarah McMahon was one of the weakest mentally among the top 10 fighters. I mean, I've seen her just flat out quit in her fights, like that fight against Miesha Tate. She was winning that fight, and she just flat out gave up. I mean, you're telling me Miesha Tate, with her high school wrestling, was able to out-wrestle a silver medalist like Sarah McMahon? Really? Like, come on. I mean, the thing is, what's going to happen if she can't take Amanda Nunes down or dominate her on the ground as she wanted to, and Amanda Nunes is able to land strikes on her at a good pace, who's to say? Maybe she just turtles up and quits, and Amanda Nunes just beats her up on her feet. So who knows? But I'm going to go with Amanda Nunes here.
And Daniel, do you like the underdog here, Amanda Nunes, or are you picking McMahon in this fight?
You know, Paulo said it so well, and I think that Sarah McMahon's one of the most overrated fighters I've ever seen in my life. You know, she comes into the UFC. Obviously, she's got the wrestling, credentials and this and that. She's undefeated. Everyone's like, oh, she's gonna be the one to challenge Rousey. She's gonna be the one to, to beat Rousey. And she goes in there and loses in under a minute and looks terrible. In her UFC debut against Sheila Gaff, who's one of the worst fighters I've ever seen in my life, she didn't. Even though she won in the first round, she didn't look that good there either. And then against Lauren Murphy, I thought Lauren Murphy won. And then against Miesha Tate, she had a great first round, and then she just abandons her game plan and lets Miesha Tate win the next 2 rounds. I mean, it wasn't a situation like Jessica Eye, where Jessica Eye got dropped, she got hurt, and Miesha, decisively beat her and took her out of her game. This was a situation where Sarah McMahon pulled a Soa Palele, and she comes out the second round and just quit, man. So I don't really know. I got Amanda Nunes here. I think she's going to hurt her.
A first-round TKO over Shayna Baszler does not mean anything. Bethe Correia beat Shayna Baszler in the second round, and then Ronda Rousey went in and stopped Bethe Correia in 34 seconds. So I can't take anything away from that fight with Nunes, but she is very deadly, and I do like her in the fight. You guys said it perfectly. Sarah McMahon is the favorite, but I'm very, very surprised that she is the favorite, and a fairly big favorite. Now, she could grind Amanda Nunes out and just win it on decision 30-27, but I think Amanda Nunes could stuff enough takedowns and knock her out because Amanda Nunes punches very hard, and Sarah McMahon is very mentally weak, like you guys said. I really haven't been impressed with her from what I've seen of her at all. She looked really bad in that Tate fight. I scored the Murphy fight for Lauren Murphy. Obviously, she gets knocked out by Ronda Rousey in just over a minute. That's nothing to you can't take anything away from that because Ronda Rousey is one of the most dominant, if not the most dominant woman athletes on this planet, but she hasn't looked good. I'm agreeing with you guys. I like Amanda Nunes to stop Sarah McMahon in the first round. Let's go on to the co-main event of the evening. We have Michael Johnson versus Beneil Dariush in a very important lightweight bout, and I've seen a lot of people pick different fighters in this fight. It's a very close fight. The odds are pretty close. Michael Johnson's a slight favorite, but I've seen lots of people pick Dariush, and he's just inside the distance. So, Daniel, who do you like here, Johnson or Dariush?
This is such a good fight. This is the one I'm looking forward to the most besides the main event. And, you know, when you talk about Michael Johnson, he's one of these guys that's on a big career resurgence, you know, similar to Robbie Lawler, similar to Matt Brown, similar to Rafael Dos Anjos. And, you know, at one point, you used to be able to just take down, you know, Michael Johnson and tap him out. And now, you know, he's stuffing the takedowns. His striking, which was always his strong point, has gotten even better. He's faster, he's more explosive, and he's taking out some top guys. You know, obviously he went toe-to-toe with Edson Barboza and beat him at his own game. Now, the thing is, Benny Dariush brings something completely different to the table. Obviously, he does have some good striking. You know, he spars with Rafael Dos Anjos on a regular basis. His coach is Master Rafa, one of the best striking coaches on the planet. But what Benny Dariush does even better is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because he's a multiple-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion. He's beat some of the best in the world. If I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on it, but I think he tapped out Kron Gracie. I could be wrong, but he tapped out one of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners on the planet. That's how he, that's how he got his name out there in the Jiu-Jitsu world. Now he comes to the UFC and he's putting on great performances left and right. Now he's got the step up against Michael Johnson. What I think is going to happen here is Michael Johnson on the feet. You know, if Benny decides to go toe-to-toe, it's going to be bad news for him. But Benny's one of the most cerebral, smart guys in the game. So I think he's going to push Michael Johnson up against the fence, take him down to the ground. And as soon as it's on the ground, it's going to be a wrap. He's going to tap out Michael Johnson.
Interesting. Going with the dog here. Paolo, who do you like here, Dariush or Johnson?
You know what? I can't go against my boy Benny Dariush. That guy has been a money train for me. He's undefeated as an underdog. The only time he lost was Ramsey Nijem, which a lot of people still like to bring up. That, oh my God, Ramsey Nijem beat him. No, Ramsey Nijem knocked him out. Michael Johnson is going to knock him out for sure. I mean, Benny Dariush has been so different ever since then. I mean, I could also bring up how Paul Sass submitted Michael Johnson, about how Reza Madadi submitted Michael Johnson, and that's entirely different Michael Johnson from the Michael Johnson now. So I'm going to go with Benny Dariush because this is sort of like a striker versus grappler fight, except they're both very well-rounded. But I think that Dariush will be more competitive on his feet as opposed to Michael Johnson on the ground. And the moment Dariush gets Johnson on the ground, it's a wrap. Dariush is going to submit him, or at least, you know, beat him up enough on the ground to earn that decision.
Yeah, I have to disagree with you guys. Like most of the time, I like Michael Johnson in this fight. I just think he's going to be able to keep it on the feet enough to get the volume out that he needs to win a decision. But of course, Benny Dariush is a very, very high-level grappler. And if, like you guys said, both said, if he gets it to the ground, it's all over. Beneil Dariush will submit Michael Johnson. But I just can't see it happening. Of course, I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever. Like I said, this is one of the closest fights, if not the closest fights on paper. But I got to side with the favorite here, Michael Johnson, to a win by decision. I think he's going to be able to keep it standing enough to just score points with his strikes and whatnot, and then take that a 29-28 decision. Now we have the main event of the evening, Ovin St. Preux taking on Glover Teixeira. And Teixeira is coming off two big losses to former champ John Jones and Phil Davis, who now fights in Bellator. And then Ovin St. Preux is riding a two-fight winning streak, a Shogun Hua knockout and Patrick Cummins knockout. His last loss was to Ryan Bader, who Glover Teixeira knocked out in 2013. But MMA math is not something you should use to pick fights. So let's see, Daniel, who do you like here in the main event?
I like Ovin St. Preux, and I'll tell you why right now. So obviously OSP is the better athlete, and here's the thing that's going on. You know, when Glover first came into the UFC, he was on like a 20-fight win streak or something crazy like that. And, you know, he comes in there, he blasts through everyone he fights, and then he gets the title shot against John Jones. And, you know, getting beat up by John Jones, that's no big deal. Everyone gets beat up by John Jones. But his next fight, it was very telling because, you know, he went on to fight Phil Davis, and we all know Phil Davis is not that great of a fighter, but in the UFC, you cannot underestimate any of your opponents. And not only did Glover underestimate Phil Davis, he completely disrespected him by training out of his home gym instead of a real gym. And I mean, that right there shows me that he will never be a UFC champion. Now, when you talk about OSP, he's making big improvements every single fight. But, you know, I can sit here and talk about, you know, how he got a Von Flue choke, which has never been done before, this and that. But what I really want to talk about is his last 2 fights where he's been capitalizing on guys that rush in and close the distance on him. He's been knocking them out. And that's exactly what Glover Teixeira wants to do. He wants to get in there, close the distance, because he's got the reach disadvantage. He's the slower guy. He's the smaller guy. He wants to get in there close. And when he does that, that's when OSP is going to land that punch and become the first man in MMA history and UFC history to knock out Glover Teixeira. Now, when OSP fought Patrick Cummins, you know, Patrick tried to close that distance, and OSP puts his right hand on the shoulder of Cummins, and then he rips that big left uppercut and knocks him out cold. So he does these little subtle things that you got to watch the replay a couple times to really see what he's doing. And, you know, he looks kind of sloppy out there, but he's so effective. So I just think he's going to be, you know, too young, too athletic, too, I don't want to say smooth because he doesn't look smooth, but it's going to be smooth, and he's going to finish Glover Teixeira.
And Paolo, who do you like here, OSP or Glover?
I like OSP on this. I actually have a pretty sizable bet on OSP here. And I'm not sure if Glover's training back with ATT now, but there was a time he said he lost to Phil Davis because he was focused on starting his own gym. He cut too much weight, and you know he shouldn't have cut that much weight. That's why he was so dehydrated against Phil Davis, and that's why he gassed early. But I don't buy it, man. I think Glover has 1 foot out the door. I think he doesn't really have much motivation in this fight. But once again, you know, I'm not Glover Teixeira, so I really don't know what it's like to be him right now. But I really like OSP here. I think Daniel covered all the reasons why I like OSP in this fight. And you know what? I've heard a lot of people say OSP doesn't have that much punching power, but I think he really does, man. I mean, it doesn't look like he hits hard, or it doesn't look like he throws a lot in his punches, but he's a beast. He's just one of those people that have just as natural strength in his fists, and that's me.
Now, I have overlooked OSP too many times, and I finally learned to side with Ovin St. Preux, and I'm not afraid to say that Glover Teixeira is probably in my top 10 of favorite fighters in the UFC. I just really am a big fan of his, but he is going to get knocked out by Ovin St. Preux. And I just find it insane that OSP is the favorite here. I believe now the lines are actually even, but he opened as a slight favorite, as a slight underdog, and it just doesn't make sense. The thing is, Glover Teixeira, if he was training at American Top Team for this fight, then I think he would, if not win, have a way better chance than he does now. Apparently, he's fighting out of his home gym again, and that's what he trained out of for the Phil Davis fight. Obviously, Styles didn't fight, but he looked awful in that fight, despite Phil Davis being a wrestler. And Ovin St. Preux is not going to try and take Glover down. I don't think that would very surprise me if he did. But it's going to be sad fight. It's going to be a war. But I do think he's going to touch Glover and knock him out. Glover Teixeira's win, I don't think it's very good. Ryan Bader was seconds away from knocking out Glover Teixeira. They were in a big exchange, and Ryan Bader landed a huge punch in Glover Teixeira's chin and wobbled the board. But Glover rebounded and was knocked out Ryan Bader cold, but he was so close to getting knocked out by Brian Bader. And I'm not high on Ryan Bader despite his wins over Davis and whatnot. I am not high on Ryan Bader, and that worries me. I do think OSP will knock Glover out midway through the fight, probably in the second or third round. All right, anything else you guys want to talk about? Preliminary card, main card, anything else you want to touch on before we get to our counter?
Yeah, make sure that you tune into Fox Sports 2 for the prelims, because that's where they're going to be. They're not going to be on Fox Sports 1, guys. So, you know, if you're not joining me for the fights, just, you know, stay tuned. That's where they're going to be. All
right, and Apollo, any other prelim fight you want to talk about? Obviously, the preliminary card is fairly decent. We have one fight I want to talk about is Dustin Ortiz versus Willie Gates, and this is a very intriguing fight in my opinion. So Daniel, let's just go to you. Who do you like here, Willie Gates or Dustin Ortiz?
Here's the thing. So Willie Gates, obviously on the feet, he's one of the tallest and longest guys in the 125-pound weight class. But if you put a little pressure on him, if you clinch him up against that fence, if you take him down to the ground, he starts to break a little bit. We saw that in the John Moraga fight. And what does Dustin Ortiz do? He closes that distance, he gets you up against the fence, he takes you down the ground, and he grinds out these decisions. So I think that the Tennessee native, Dustin Ortiz, is going to shine in front of the Nashville crowd.
And Paolo, who do you like here? Dustin Ortiz, the reasonably sized favorite, or are you siding with the underdog here, Willie Gates?
Oh, I really like Dustin Ortiz, man. Dustin Ortiz is tough. He's a great wrestler. He does a lot of things well. And Willie Gates is taking this on a short notice. So I think Willie Gates, I think Ortiz is just gonna style on him, wrestle him down, and beat him up. But the thing about Ortiz is he gets in a lot of close fights, even if he's against a newcomer or against like a top 10 guy like Joseph Benavidez. He will go to a decision in a close fight. But I like Dustin Ortiz to win at least 2 out of 3 rounds here, if not all 3.
I'm gonna disagree with you guys again, because that's what I do. That's my trademark. I just disagree with you guys. I'm siding with whoop-ass Willie Gates in this fight. I just think he's overall the better fighter. And the thing, he debuted on short notice against top contender John Moraga. And John Moraga, I consider to be definitely a top 5 fighter, if not number 6, number 7. And Willie Gates, in my opinion, from what I remember of that fight, looked pretty damn good against John Moraga. And he took the fight on a week's notice. Obviously, Jussier Formiga was supposed to fight John Moraga on that December Fox card. Willie Gates stepped up. He looked good in the first round, and I think it was in the second round that John Moraga tapped him out. It might have been the third. I can't recall completely, but I think he looked pretty good. And then obviously, Daryl Montague, he recently was knocked out by Willie Gates. Obviously, Montague is a completely different fighter than Dustin Ortiz. Like you guys mentioned, I think Dustin Ortiz's style could go very well up against Willie Gates. He could just grind out a decision. But I think Willie Gates may be able to catch him, and Ortiz is a very durable guy. He hasn't been knocked out, from what I know, too many, if at all. And the Gates is a knockout guy, so obviously that won't work. But anybody can get knocked out. No one's chin is invincible, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if Willie Gates knocks him out. If not, win a decision. So that's all I have to say about that. So let's get to our counter-move teams. Daniel, I'll give you a second to pull it up if you don't have it up already. But who's on your 5-person counter-move team for UFC Fight Night 73, UFC Nashville?
I'm going to tell you off the top of my head. I'm pretty damn sure that these are the guys that are on my team. I think it's OSP, Benny Dariush, Amanda Nunes, Ray Borg, and Serwan Kakai.
And Paolo, who do you have on your counter-move team?
Okay, so I got Benny, Pornstash, Timothy Johnson, Scott Holtzman, Ray Borg, the Tax Mexican Devil, and OSP.
Right, and my counter-move team, I have Ovincing Prue knocking out Glover Teixeira. I have Amanda Nunes knocking out Sarah McMahon. I have Ray Borg submitting Jean Herrera. I have Willie Gates either winning a big decision and getting lots of points or knocking out Dustin Ortiz. And I have Scott Holtzman knocking out Anthony, I don't want to say his name, but I think that's the biggest lock on this card, Scott Holtzman versus Anthony Cristodolo or whatever his name is. I don't know. I'm the worst pronouncer of these names, but I'm not going to be upset about it. I think that's about it. We have counter-move, we have the fights. Anything else you want to talk about? DraftKings picks or anything else before we wrap the show up? Daniel, Paolo, anything?
I got to give all my plugs. I mean, I don't think now's the time for that. But, obviously I want to thank everyone that watched this show. It means a lot to me that you guys tune in, hear our voices, look at our pretty faces. So thank you so much to all the viewers of the show.
All right, let's get to the shout-outs. Daniel, appreciate you coming back on the show, as always, before the battle. Couldn't go on without you. Who do you have to thank? Any what's coming up with your podcast and whatnot? And yeah.
Well, obviously, like I just said, I want to thank every single person that watches or listens to this show. I truly appreciate it. You can feel free to hit me up anytime you want. at Best Fight Picks on Twitter, at MMA Thought on Twitter. You go to bestfightpicks.com, you type your email in that top right corner, you get the Best Fight Picks sent directly to your inbox every single fight week. Obviously, my podcast, Half the Battle, and newly, Best Fight Picks Radio. You go to soundcloud.com/bestfightpicks to subscribe to that, or you go to youtube.com, you find the Best Fight Picks channel, and you subscribe to that. So thank you guys so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the fights.
And Paolo, where can we find you on social media and all your writing, all your work over on, you write for 2 websites that I know of. Just let us know what they are, what's coming up for you, and anything else.
Okay, so I'm currently writing for Today's Knockout, that's at Today's Knockout, and at Vendetta Fighter. And you can find me on Twitter at GoPaoloMMA or at GoPaolo.com. That's my personal site. I also do a travel blog because I've been to a couple of places. Might as well share it with you guys. And I wanted to give a shout out to the UFC group, the largest UFC group on Facebook. We have 75,000 members. We're continuing to clean it up now. Zero tolerance on any trolls or any negative Nancy's on there, and it's been good so far. And I wanted to give a shout out to all the Toronto peeps, to James Lynch, Adam Martin, and to whoever the other Toronto guys are. I really want the UFC to come back to Toronto. I want MMA to come back to Toronto. It's been a while, man. I can't remember the last UFC event on Toronto. I think it was Gus and John Jones, that epic fight. That was the last event in Toronto, and that's been forever. And yeah, like Daniel said, thank you to everyone that watches the show. Got nothing but love for y'all.
And I'd like to shout out Winnipeg. And no, I'm kidding. No one lives in Winnipeg because it's like the garbage city in the world, basically. But I live here, whatever. But shout out to, let's see, shout out to the UFC for finally coming to Saskatoon, finally coming to somewhere I can actually drive, well, my dad, but I can sit in the passenger seat, let's say that. But I'm obviously going to the Saskatoon event in a couple weeks. Excited for that, my first MMA event, so that's gonna be really crazy. But finally, just coming back to Canada, even hopefully UFC has more Canadian events next year. Obviously, Toronto, Calgary. Obviously, you can find me on Twitter at NickUFC. Check out my website, MMAjunior.co. We'll have lots of pre-fight and post-fight coverage of UFC Nashville, and head over there for your latest news, opinions, results, much more. My weekly podcast, I host it with John King some of the time, not always. MMA Junior Radio, find that at MMAjuniorradio.com. Earlier this week, we had the host of the Stand and Bang podcast, Aaron Robbins. We had James Krause, and we had Zach Cummings. The following 2 fighters we had on to talk about their latest wins over Darren Cruikshank and Dominic Steele, respectively, on the last Fox card a couple of weeks back. This week, we have Winnipeg fighter Roland Lorme. He fights next weekend. So he's coming on the show to talk about that, he's going to come on to possibly talk about getting back inside the UFC and much more. And we're working on Alistair Overeem to come on the show. That's not official yet, but hopefully he'll be on next episode. And I think that's about it. Like I said, hit me up on Twitter at NickUFC. Thanks to you both for coming back on Before the Battle. I, of course, appreciate that. Of course, and until then, enjoy the fight.